Anotida, welcome to our podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time. We look forward to learning from you and having this conversation. Uh, so, to get us started, would you share a bit more about your background and what inspires you?
Yeah, so my name is Anotida. I'm 18. I'm from Kansas City, Missouri, but I'm originally from Zimbabwe, Africa. My family and I immigrated when I was 3 years old, and I guess that's probably like what inspires me the most is just being an immigrant, trying to make my parents proud, and complete the American dream, whatnot. But yeah, I'm just from a small Midwestern town. It's not that small, but from the Midwest, and I am just inspired by my family the most.
That's awesome. Uh, so, Anatita, you're heading to Brown this
Mhm.
fall. So, congratulations.
Thank
It's
you.
exciting. It should be a great time. Uh, but can you help us understand when do you decide to aim for Ivy League colleges? I mean, Brown is a hard college
Uh-huh.
into, so we'd love to understand the start of your journey.
Yeah, so anytime people ask me like, "Oh, like, why did you wanna go to Brown?" Or like, "When did you start, like, thinking about the Ivy?" I always tell them about a conversation I had with my brother because he's definitely been, like, one of my biggest inspirations, and it was during my freshman year, we were just walking down, like, the street, and I hadn't seen him in a little while because he lives in New York City, but he asked me like, "Oh, like, where are you, like, wanting to go to school?" And at that time, my dream had always been to live in California because I love warm weather and just like the vibes there. So I knew I wanted to go to school in California. That's like all I really knew at the time. And I think my goal at that point, or like my dream, was like one of the UCs, because those were the only California schools I really knew about. So I tell him like, oh, like I want to go to a school in California, and he looks at me and like a really casual voice. He's like, oh, so like Stanford? And I was, like, shocked at that point. I was like, "No, of course not. I could never get into a school like Stanford." And he was like, "Sure you could." And he had gone to Duke. He's a lot older than me, so he had been graduated at that point. But he was like, "Yeah, you could get into Stanford. Like, if you work hard, if you get good grades, have good test scores, like, of course you could." And I don't know what it was about that conversation, but it just, like, completely changed my perspective. Like, I remember going home that day, like, setting a bunch of, like, time restrictions on, like, the apps on my phone because 'cause I'm like, I don't wanna spend all my time on, like, social media. I wanna actually, like, put time into school and, like, because just at that point, like, I hadn't been as focused as I needed to be, and it was just something about how, like, casual he was about it, like, he wasn't putting pressure on me, like, I have to get into these schools, but he also wasn't treating it like it was some unattainable goal. He was just like, "Yeah, you could get into Stanford if you work hard," and even though Stanford, like, is not the school I'm going to or the school that I applied to, that was the shift in my mind where I decided, like, getting into a good school not only was a goal I could achieve, but, like, it was my new goal.
Got it. That's a great story. Uh, so help us understand now that you got that guidance, that confidence that your brother had in you. How many colleges did you apply to? And then help us understand what was the yield, how many accepted you.
Well, I got lucky. I knew that Brown was the school I wanted to go to. Like there was no other school in my mind. Maybe Duke, because that's where my brother went, and I figured at least we'd have that connection. But apart from Duke, like Brown was the main school I wanted to go to. So I applied early decision and I got in. So I didn't need to apply to other schools, but I think I did apply to a couple schools early action. But I just never ended up hearing back from them because once I got into Brown, I rescinded those applications. So I guess I'll never know what other schools I could have gotten into because the one I wanted accepted me.
Oh, that is fantastic. So ED with Brown
Mhm.
and then a few EAs,
Yeah.
and that was it. You didn't have to go any farther than that.
No, I got my acceptance in December and I knew where I was going from there. I saw all the other kids in my school like stressed about where they were gonna apply, and I'm like, I wish I could relate to that because I know I'm going.
That's awesome. That's awesome. But I'm sure when you were applying, when you were planning to apply, when you were putting
Mhm.
your strategy, you put together a list of colleges. You mentioned UC.
Right.
So what was your selection criteria? And how did you
Mhm.
bucketize what would be your reach schools, what would be your target school, what would be your safety schools?
Yeah, it was tough to figure it out because you know how much work you put into school, but you don't know where you stand in relation to other people, so I didn't wanna be overconfident and think like, "Oh, yeah, like, Berkeley is my target school," when, like, maybe I'm not good enough for Berkeley. Like, it's hard to, like, know where exactly you stand. But I think at the time, again, Brown was by reach. It was like the school that I like knew for sure I wanted to get into. And then I think I just looked at like those common data sets, like test scores and GPA, and I figured if I have the average test score of a school, then that should be like my target. So I think at the time my targets were like UNC, UVA, some of the other like public colleges in that realm because I was within like the 50th percentile of their test scores.
Got it. So test score was the key criteria you used to figure out which would be reach, target, and safety.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, even with Brown, like I knew that my test scores were like average for Brown. Like I wasn't like my test scores were good enough for Brown, but I just never wanted to treat an Ivy League like it was a target school. Like I always knew that those were going to be the reach schools. But when it came to other schools that like aren't in the Ivy League, if my test scores and my grades were they're like average, I figured that's a good place to start.
Got it. And what was the total number of schools that you were planning to apply? I mean, assuming, I mean, I
Hmm.
get go through with the application, but what
Yeah.
were the number? How many were you planning to apply?
Um, it's funny. I thought before my senior year I was gonna apply to more schools because you grow up watching those like reaction videos. People have like 20 schools. But when it all like started, I kind of realized like writing essays for college is just really hard, and I don't want to spread myself thin like applying to so many places, meaning that I can't put in like the effort into each essay. So I think there probably maybe like eight schools in total that I was planning on applying to if I got like deferred from Brown or I didn't get in. But it wasn't as many as I thought it was going to be.
Got it. Got it. So, and eight is a good number. I mean, you're clearly right. Some apply to 20, even known students who go to 30, 35,
It's
right?
crazy.
That that's a commitment.
Mhm.
What would be your guidance in terms of how would you recommend students learn more about a college before they decide to apply
Mhm.
to it and then show that they know about the college through the application? How should they go about learning more about the college?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to me. I feel like there are a lot of actually, there are a lot of people who like make a business out of trying to tell you like what a college is looking for, right? And funny enough, most colleges like will just tell you what they're looking for. Like if you look like through like their like websites and like the information, like there's not like a secret code to decipher. Like they oftentimes will tell you exactly what they're looking for. And like one of the best advices I got was from a student at Yale. He was like, if you're wondering like for essays and stuff, like what is a college looking for? Like how do I like make them like how do I appeal like the student that they want? Like look at the questions that they're asking you because a lot of times the questions that they ask you are like indicative of what they're looking for, right? Like if they're looking for STEM students, they'll ask you questions about STEM and that's like tells you what you need to know. So I'd say like the first place if you're like trying to figure out like about a college, like look through the questions that they ask you, like in their supplemental essays. Because if they're asking you about like what you like to do outside of school and like your social activities, then they're a social kind of school, right? Like that's like their culture, and they want to know that their students fit into that culture. And then obviously just like looking on their website, looking at videos from current students, all that kind of stuff. But don't I would say to students like don't feel like you have to like pay people to tell you what a college is looking for or what they're like because like a lot of the times they'll just tell you if you look at the right places.
That's great advice. I think one of the other aspects of learning more about colleges that comes up quite often, and I would love to learn what you think about that, is the aspect of college visits.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
How important is visiting college?
Mm. So I have yet to visit Brown. I've never seen their campus in person, so I don't know if it's a huge deal. I think most colleges say that they don't like expect that you visit them because they understand that like different financial circumstances like would prevent you from being able to do so. But it can give you like an idea of what a college is like. Like for example, like something that's important to me is like a physical campus. Like I'm not a big like city person, so a campus like Columbia, I have visited Columbia when I was in New York to visit my brother, and like I knew right away it was just not the place for me. Like it's in the middle of New York City. It's very much like intertwined with city life, and that's just not my vibe. So I do think like it can be college visits can be good in like confirming what you might think. Like if you think a school might not be the fit for you, or if you think it might be the fit for you, seeing it in person can confirm that. But from like the college's perspective, I don't think they expect that you do that.
Got it. Yeah, that's great. Uh, I know you mentioned you did Brown as early decision, and then
Mhm.
you did a few early action. What was your strategy in deciding what should be early decision and what would be early action? Early decision is a commitment.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely don't do early decision if you're, like, in between a school. Again, once I knew Brown was where I wanted to go, I didn't waver on that. Like, I knew there's no other school that I wanted to go to, so I felt really good doing early decision. But, like, if you even feel like, there's a chance you might wanna go somewhere else, I would, like, hold off on doing that. The early action for me was more about, like, comfort because I figured if I didn't get into Brown, I would go into the regular admission cycle much more comfortable if I knew that I had gotten accepted somewhere. So I don't want to say they were easier schools because they're still hard schools to get into. But again, like I said, they were schools that I knew my test scores were good enough for. So I figured I had a better chance of getting into them. And if I knew had gotten into them going into the regular admission cycle, I would just feel so much more at ease. Like I'm not, it's not like, oh, if I don't get into a school regular admission, I'm not going to college. Like I just felt like it would give me so much more security. So that's was my rationale for my early action. And then again, early decision was just there's no other school I want to go to, so I might as well.
Got it. So you have to be really sure, and that's what you were with Brown. That's why you went with early decision. Got it.
Yeah.
Just pivoting away from the school selection to picking your recommenders, right?
Mhm.
Who to ask for recommendations? Because that's an aspect that I've seen a lot of students not spend as much time as I would expect them to, because it's an
Mhm.
opportunity for them to have somebody else highlight a personality trait that they want the school to understand and appreciate. So,
Mhm.
how did you pick your recommenders?
Yeah, that is so true. It is so much more important than I think some kids realize because it's like confirmation from colleges that everything they're saying about you is actually true, right? Like you obviously are going to inflate certain character traits about yourself, but if somebody else who has no like stake in the fight is saying no, they are actually this hardworking, I've seen it for myself, that can make all the difference in the world. And for me, I got a lot of advice again from my brother because he was really like there for me throughout the whole process. He was like, you should invest in getting a recommender who's like outside of school because like yes your teachers know you within a school setting, they can talk about how smart you are, they can talk about your grades, but like a lot of that stuff they'll an admissions officer will know just by looking at your transcript. Like they don't necessarily need your teacher to tell you that you're really smart because they've seen your grades, but like if you have somebody outside of the school setting that can talk about like your character and your energy and your spirit in like a non-academic setting, that just makes you seem like you're like a person, you know what I mean? Like it personalizes your application so it's like you're not just a number and a grade, you're like this person outside of school. So I I did recommendations from like three teachers that I was really close with, one of whom was like my debate coach, and then I also did a fourth recommendation from a woman who I had worked with outside of school for a nonprofit, and we had worked like closely volunteering for a long time. So she was able to talk about like who I was outside of school so that my admissions officer didn't just know me academically, they could like know me as a person.
Got it. That's great advice. Um, Now, obviously, college admissions, there's an aspect you mentioned essays. We talked
Mhm.
about recommenders. But there's an aspect of hard facts,
Mhm.
ACT score, SAT scores, class rank, GPA. Those matter.
Yeah.
Would you share your hard facts, ACT,
Yeah.
whatever else you deem were important aspects of your application?
Yeah, so in terms of those stats, my ACT, my highest composite score was a 34, and my super score was a 35. And then for class rank, I was valedictorian, so I was one out of I think 500-ish people in my graduating class. I'm trying to think, is there any other stat? I don't know. I didn't take AP like test scores are the only other thing I submitted to. I took six APs. Took six AP tests. I took eight in total, but only six tests. And on all six tests, I got a five. So my hard like stats were pretty good for the most part, pretty good. I like didn't have any like glaring like struggles in terms of like low tests or like a low GPA. I like tried my hardest to make sure that all of those like hard facts were as good as they could be.
Those are fantastic numbers. Uh, for folks who are preparing for ACT, SAT,
Mhm,
what guidance would you give them? Right? When
mhm,
to start, when to take, how many times to take, how much time to devote to the preparation? Because I've seen some students are in category of they do enough, but then there are lots of students who don't do enough or do way too much.
Right, right. So anytime somebody asks me about the ACT, they're like, "Oh, like, what advice do you give?" I always have the same piece of advice, and I always feel bad giving it because I know it's not something everybody can do. But like, if you are able to get a tutor to help you, the ACT, like, it's so different from any other test because it's not like it's so hard to just improve your score through sheer willpower. Like in every other like studious setting, I've been able to get by just studying more, right? Like if I just study more, if I just spend more time, I'll understand the content. But the ACT and the SAT, they're not like that. They're just like a different test. And there's like secrets to it that are so hard to figure out on your own. Like it's not impossible, but it's just you work so much harder trying to figure it out if you're just doing it by yourself. And the biggest like indicator I can give of that is with my science score. So like math, reading, English, like all of those other subjects I could kind of get by on my own. The science section, I was just horrible at. Like there like no matter how much time I spent on it, I could never get above like a 24. And I finally got a like specific tutor just for the science section. And I think I only had like 2, maybe 3 sessions with him total, but he genuinely raised my score from like a 24 to when I took it for the first time, a 36, just through like his advice and like showing me the things that I wasn't understanding. So when it comes to like how much time you should spend into it, you're gonna have to spend a lot of time if you're just doing it on your own, because again, it's not like another test where you can just like willpower your way to doing better. But if you have the resources to invest in getting outside help, like there are people who literally it is their job to help people improve their ACT score, and like they can help you so much. So I would say my best piece of advice is if you can afford it, try and find a tutor because it'll cut down on the amount of time you have to spend studying, and the time you're spending will be used so much more efficiently.
Great advice. Thank you. I so we went from SATs, ACTs being a requirement
Mhm,
to them being optional. Now, lots of schools going back to them being required.
mhm.
What are your thoughts on the importance of ACT and SAT scores in the application in the broader context?
That's a really good question because I've thought about this a lot. And on the one hand, I don't think that the ACT is like indicative of how intelligent you are. Because, like I said before, like you can pay people to help you increase your score. Like, I don't think I was less smart when I was struggling with the science section. I just didn't understand the ACT at that point. And like somebody helped me understand it. And that's where I was able to do better on it. But like I wasn't less capable academically beforehand. And like not everyone has the resources to be able to get that help. So I don't believe that the ACT, like if you have a lower ACT, that is like indicative of you not deserving your place at a good college. At the same time, I understand why colleges have brought back the ACT because it is so hard to evaluate students otherwise when you have like 50,000 applications. Like from what I've read, it became just a nightmare trying to like differentiate and understand like how academically well students were actually doing because things like GPA, like there are lots of schools that will inflate GPA. It's just so hard to tell otherwise. So I understand from colleges' perspectives why they're bringing it back because I think it's really hard to tell otherwise, like who academically will be able to keep up with the rigor at your school. I just personally, it makes me sad because I feel like it sends the message to students that if you don't have a certain ACT score, that you're not like good enough for these places. And I truly like wholeheartedly believe that standardized testing is not like indicative of your intelligence. It's just a metric of how well you can take that certain test. If that makes sense.
No, it does make sense, and thank you. Um, so, Anatita, transitioning to extracurriculars, because that's the other very important aspect of application. So, what should be the strategy? What was your strategy now that you've gone through the whole application cycle successfully? Looking back, what should have been the strategy, right? Because I've seen students who pick a few, go deep. And then I've
Mhm.
seen students who want to show a broad range of competencies, so they go broad, right?
Right.
What are your thoughts? How did you do it, and how would you recommend
Mhm.
others think about it?
Yeah, well, I think either strategy can work if you do it well, but I would say that the former one is probably where people are going to have the most success because you can better like convey who you are as a person, or not who you, but like you create an image of who you are to an admissions officer that's easier to follow than if you just did a bunch of different things everywhere. So my strategy going into it, and again, this is all like freshman year me trying to plan out what I was going to do, but I knew that I was much more like humanity centered than I was STEM centered. So I remember like making like pre-making my college application of like things that I wanted to do that I like saw other people doing, and I like just wrote out that list of things. And then as I went throughout not college, went throughout high school, I tried to like fulfill those things. So like debate, I had done debate in middle school. I was doing it in high school. I knew I wanted to be like president and do well in that. So I wrote that down on my list. And then when the time came, I applied to be president and got it. And I just made it so that instead of like inversely doing activities and then writing them down once application time started, I wrote down everything I wanted to do and then I went and did it. So that by the time I was applying, I already had this list of like achievements and extracurriculars that I like could convey. So I would advise people like if you know from like the onset of high school that you want to get into a good college, don't like wait until the opportunities come to like take them. Like write down what you want to do and then do everything you can to get those opportunities. And then try and create like a story that connects all of them so that it conveys something that's easy to follow as opposed to like being so broad that we don't really get a picture of who you are. So for me, that was the humanities, where I wanted to convey that as a very humanities centered person who like was engaged in politics and like literature and like all of that stuff. So I made sure that all of my activities surrounded that. So that when it was time to apply, like I had a story that I could tell admissions officers that they would understand.
That's such a good strategy. So you went very proactive. You decided this is what I want to highlight, which
Hmm.
means these are some of the activities I need to do, which means I have already decided what the goal is, and then you spent all of high school making that a reality. And then you did a
Yeah.
few so that you can actually have a good narrative, which can be cohesively put together so that the
Hmm.
application or committee understands who you are as an applicant.
Right, right. Yeah, I think proactive is a good word. I just tried I didn't I wanted to have like a goal that I was achieving as opposed to feeling like I was living life and then I was going to try and document it afterwards. I wanted to like have each milestone like put on a piece of paper that I could look at and being like, this is what I need to do next. This is what I need to do next. And then maybe some things would change. Like there were some things that like I had planned on doing, but I just didn't get it. So I like revised it a bit, but I always had like that basic template of like these are the activities I want to do, this is what I want to excel at, and I'm going to try and work hard to do them as opposed to just hoping that I do it later.
Got it. So, what were some of the extracurricular activities that you participated in, and how did you showcase your leadership skills?
Mhm. Well, I tried to make sure that in most of the activities I did, I wanted selfishly, I wanted it to be an activity that like had a leadership role that was like that could easily be characterized, like president, vice president, something like that. And if they did, I aimed to be one of those roles. So I like I said, I was on the debate team. I was the president. I did student government for 2 years of high school. I was one of the vice presidents. I was a part of one of my school's diversity clubs, and I was the vice president for that. So those were like the school related things that I did. And then outside of school, I already mentioned that like nonprofit that I worked with. I founded like a branch of their nonprofit specifically for youth. Um, and just opportunities like that. Again, there were things that came up that I didn't like anticipate. So I always tried to look to maximize those opportunities. But when it came to leadership, again, being proactive and knowing that a person was going to read like my application, I wanted the leadership to be as easy to understand as possible. And I feel like if you're president, if you're vice president, if you're the founder of something like that, automatically conveys leadership without you even having to like explain it.
That's great. Uh, I mean, one thing that you mentioned briefly, and I want to dig into that, is the role of awards. And there's an
Hmm.
aspect of doing something, and I'm sure most of the students do extracurriculars because they enjoy them, right? But there's an aspect of having satisfaction in being part of an extracurricular that you enjoy. But then there is an external validation. Awards are that. So how much should applicants focus on collecting awards while they are engaged in extracurricular activities or sports activities, right? Both of those.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think it's very important. Because I think there's two sides of it. Like one, you know, even if you didn't get awards, right? Just committing to something and doing it frequently will show a college that you're able to put like effort into things, and like that is indicative of like a strong work ethic and a good character that is like attractive. But also like if you excel in something, then that's like attractive too, right? Like they want the best of the best in certain areas because there's a chance that you'll continue doing that in college. So like one of my biggest awards was related to debate. I went to nationals and I got fifth in my event. And that was an award that I could list to show like I didn't just do debate, I excelled at it. And if you were to admit me, I could join the debate team at Brown and like be able to positively contribute there. So I think awards are important. I don't think you have to have them in everything because, again, if you show that you're committed to something and that you put an effort into it, that is indicative of like your work ethic. But I also think that colleges they want people that are going to do well in like their programs. So it's like if you won a cool math competition, then you can also do that in college, and that's something that they want too. So definitely push yourself to like get those like actual accolades and stuff because it might be debatable whether or not you put an effort to something, right? Like that's hard to prove, but like nobody can disprove that you accomplished your words.
Uh, Shifting the topic to the favorite topic that of every applicant, right? Application essays. Um, what? How did you approach your application essays? How did you pick the topic? I mean, clearly you had a lot of things going on. You're
Mhm.
good at a lot of different things. You could talk about a lot of different things. And within each of those things, there are many nuances that you could highlight. How did you approach what topic to pick and what aspect of that topic to highlight in your application essay?
Yeah, essays are tough. I again, I was very obsessed with the whole process, especially when I was early in high school. So I remember even like sophomore year, I was like trying to figure out what I was going to write about, and you can imagine everything I tried to write about was terrible. It was all really bad, and even up until like my senior year, most of my essays weren't very good. And I think for a lot of students, it usually isn't very good because it's just hard. Like it's hard to like know what to write about. You want to be like show humility, but also you want to like brag about yourself. But you want to be authentic, but like it's not authentic because you're spending hours writing it. Like it's just really tough. So I would say like my saving grace that I am still so thankful for is that at the beginning of my senior year in my English class, I was in AP Lit. My teacher was like, okay, your first assignment is going to be your college essay. Like, we're not going to focus on books or like reading. She was like, I've been teaching for, decades now. And I, every time I've tried to make an assignment, kids don't focus on it because they're just worried about their college essay. So I just decided at some point, you know what, we're just going to make your first writing assignment your college essay so that I can help you on it. You get time. I know you're busy with other things. So like, no matter what, you have at least an hour a day in my class to work on your college essay. And like, I'll be here to help you. So that was like a big saving grace for me that I had that time to work on it and that she was looking it over because she was able to be like the first one to like not societally tell me this is not very good. Like this is not a good essay. You need to like go back to the drawing page. So after that class and kind of realizing that I was needing to start over, I basically just I think I found a video when I was talking about college essays. I was found a video was talking about the prompts to pick because I figured I'm like, okay, let me just start with a prompt, like figure out what prompt to use, right? And I watched the video and he said, pick this prompt because not a lot of kids pick it. It's like a unique one and it'll allow you to appear more humble or like have more humility. It's the prompts about like what's something somebody has done for you that like you're thankful for, right? And it's like you can show that you can, express gratitude and like most kids don't pick this prompt. So I picked that prompt and then I kind of worked from there to like write my essay based on the prompt. And then I had a bunch of my teachers read it. And then I finally came with something that I was like happy with. So the essay process, it's so hard. Like it's just it's a whirlwind. But I would say that if you are like struggling, try and find like a unique prompt that's different from what other people will do because at least that'll set you apart. Like even if the essay isn't perfect, like people will notice the fact that you went out of your way to like challenge yourself with a different prompt. And also don't waste time in your essay feeling like you have to brag about everything you've done because you spent the entire rest of your application on your achievements, on your awards. Like the admissions officer already knows that you're really smart and have all these amazing extracurriculars. You don't need to waste time in your essay talking about that. So I would have said try and like again make yourself more of a person to them and like show who you are outside of school because they already know all of your achievements already. You don't need to like waste time talking about it again in your essay.
Got it. Got it. How much time did you eventually end up spending in writing essays?
Too much time. Like I literally every single like word I had to make sure it was perfect. I would like at some point I think I literally titled like once I was like done with it, I like titled it in my document like do not open this page, like do not open this document because I knew that I was gonna like stop looking at it for a few days and be like, wait, did I make sure like did I do this? And like I just had to remind myself, yes, you did. You checked it 1,000 times, you've worked on it like for hours. Like it is perfect. Do not open this document again to try and change something because you can like over edit things and like make it too perfect where it's like not even like it doesn't feel like a student wrote it. It felt like it's some chatbot wrote it because you just have like spent so much time on it. But I definitely spend like just like hours on it. Like anytime I like wasn't focusing in class or like not working on like school, I would just spend time on my essays because I just knew it was going to be like a really big point in my college admissions application because it was what was gonna convey like my personality to whoever was reading it.
Got it. And one other aspect that students I've seen struggle with is so there's obviously a common essay, coalition essay, common essay, one of those essays.
Mhm.
There are supplemental essays, right? And then when you're writing each of those essays, you're deep in it, you're writing it, it's great. But then the aspect of stepping back and looking at all the essays that you have put together for a particular college and ensuring that you're not repeating yourself, you're highlighting different aspects across the 6 or 7 essays that you're going to be submitting. Any guidance on that? Because that's one of the things that we have spent at Good Goblin addressing. But I would love to hear how you have approached it in your application.
Yeah, no, it's definitely hard. I would say the best thing you can do is just giving yourself time because I mean, like I've seen stories of people who like wrote all their essays in one night or like did it really quick. I don't know how that like how you do that successfully because I just feel like there's a certain point where your brain just like stops being able to see things. Like you've worked so long on it, like you're not even reading it anymore. Like your brain is just numb. So you have to take a break and like step back and like give yourself some time in between that and then come back to it and be like, oh, I missed that. So if you give yourself ample amount of time, then you have all of those breaks to be like, I worked on it and then I took a break and I came back and I saw this thing I can fix. And like just giving yourself that amount of time to like step away from it, that'll like allow you to see the bigger picture. Cause you're right, like once you're when you're like in it, it's just so hard to see. But like you need to be able to like step away and like not think about it for a while. Like go like a few days of like I haven't looked at my essay, I haven't thought about it. And then you can come back. And like sometimes I'd come back and be like, did I really I wrote that down? Like I thought that was a good idea. Um, and then second thing I'd say is having other people read it is super important. I had like I said initially, like my English teacher was the one who like first kind of like not so subtly told me that my first essay was really bad. So I probably would have submitted that essay had she like not been there to intervene. But also just having her and like my other English teachers and like my debate coach read all of it, like all of their input helped me see things that I wouldn't have initially seen. So if you give yourself a lot of time to prep and you also use outside voices to help you see things, then I think you'll no doubt have an essay that you're happy with.
Got it. Uh, Interviews. Did you end up doing an interview for Brown?
No, they don't do interviews. They do that video portfolio. So I did submit one of those, but I did not have to get interviewed.
Okay, got it. That's good. One other aspect that comes up quite often, and I want to understand how you internalized it, is, and that's a concern that parents and students both share with us, is the cost of attending a 4 year school.
Mhm.
While we understand every student situation is different, is there any guidance that you can offer students as they tackle this topic, particularly in picking the schools that they apply to, picking the school that they attend, right? Anything as it relates to cost as a factor in
Right.
going to colleges.
Well, this is one of the things that's kind of a downside of early decision is once you get in, you obviously can't apply to other places. So one of the strategies I know other people have used is let's say they get into, Brown and Princeton. I think Princeton gives a little bit more financial aid, like depending on your income. So, theoretically, if you get into both, you can show Brown your financial aid package from Princeton and be like, hey, I really want to go to Brown, but Princeton's offering me more money. Can you like match that? And a lot of schools will like match the offers that they get from other places. So that is a downside of early decision that like maybe I would have done differently if I had known. Just that you can use offers from other schools to get more money from the school you want to go to if you're getting more money someplace else. That's one piece of advice I'd give. The other one I give is don't like let the just sticker price intimidate you because especially when it comes to like T20 top 20 schools, yes, the cost of attendance is like ridiculous, but because they are elite colleges, they get such an influx of wealthy students that are coming to their schools that can pay those costs of attendance that they can give a lot of aid to students that can't attend it. Like it is like they're not like lying when they say that it is genuinely more affordable for low income students than what you would think. So don't like not apply to a place because you think you can't afford it because like chances are if you are like low income that they make it more affordable than you think. But it is, I think, the most tough for students that aren't necessarily like low income, but they aren't wealthy either. They fall into that like middle class because you get like treated based on your family's like income, right? That is like a middle class income. But that doesn't necessarily mean you just have like tens of thousands of dollars of like disposable income to be putting into college. So I do really sympathize with people that fall into that like middle category because they probably have it the hardest. And I think for them, scholarships are what's usually going to be the best route to offsetting those costs because scholarship money, I mean, there's so many scholarships out there that are willing to help you with your like financial journey. I apply to a lot of scholarships and they're helping me cover most, if not all of the costs. So yeah, those are like my biggest pieces of advice is if you're somebody who's like so cracked that you can get into multiple elite colleges, leverage those packages against each other, and then also apply to as many scholarships as you can.
Such great advice. Thank you. Um, Pivoting to balance, you clearly had a lot of things going on, right? Extracurricular, schoolwork, ACT, debate. How did you balance schoolwork, extracurricular, and all the other stuff that was going on, and then applying?
Yeah, no, it was tough. I don't know if I. I think that. Oh my gosh, I don't know what happened. I think I swallowed. Anyway, balance. I think there was a time there that I think junior year, like final season, where I did not find the balance. I was not getting a lot of sleep. I was working really hard. I was super stressed out. And I wish I could go back to that version of me and like tell her that she could, calm down a bit, like pump the brakes, like things were gonna be okay. But it is so hard, like once you're in it, all of it, and just the deadlines start packing up or piling up and you have all these things to do, like you just feel like I just have to get it all done. Like if it means I have to stay up until 2, then that's what it means. But you're like, I can't not get it done. So that was really hard. But I think the best thing that happened to me in finding balance was just my relationships with other people. Because even though I was so like into what I was doing and I would never like take a break for myself, I would take a break for other people. Like if somebody else was like, "Hey, I want to hang out with you. I want to like spend time with you." That would be what pushed me to be like, "Okay, I'm not going to do this in order to hang out with this person." So I would say like my best piece of advice, because again, if you're the kind of person who's like watching this podcast or like interested in college admissions, you're very work driven, you're very ambitious. So it's probably gonna be hard for you to just take the time out for yourself and be like, I'm not gonna study in order to put myself first, right? Like that's hard to do. But if you find people around you who care about you, who like want to spend time with you, like they can be the ones to push you to find that balance because you care about those relationships. So I would say like don't allow yourself to be like isolated from people and like just spending time on academics because you can like lose yourself and just like not even like know like what the point of all of it is if you're like just spending your time on academics. But I still have struggled to find the balance with things. I think I'm getting better now. now that it's all over. But in the midst of it, it's definitely hard.
Right. Uh, what I know we went through the whole journey, but one aspect that comes up quite often is the aspect of luck. What role do you think luck plays in the admission process?
That's a good question. I mean, it has to play like a role, obviously, because like you have all these there's so many like kids that deserve to be here, right? Like they have the test scores, they have the grades, they have extracurriculars, but you just don't have like enough spots for everyone. So like I do think luck plays a role in it, but from what I've seen from some people, I think you can like out luck. Like I think you can like work so hard that luck just doesn't become a factor. Like I've seen people again who get into like Harvard and Stanford and Princeton and Yale, like all of them, and I'm like that they didn't just get lucky 4 times. Like they had to have worked so hard and been so impressive that all of these elite colleges are like we want you and like we will like fight these other schools to get you. So I think luck is a factor, but I guess what I don't like agree with is the way people like sell themselves short because of luck. Like they think that oh, like it's just a lottery. Like it's just a lottery who gets in. Like yes, there's luck to it, but like you can work so hard that luck just isn't a factor anymore. And again, it's not easy to do, but don't convince yourself that there's no point because of luck because there is a point, and you can also play the numbers game of like yeah maybe you don't get lucky at one school, but if you apply to 20 of them, like surely you're gonna get lucky once out of 20. But yeah, I think it plays some role, but I've just never been one of those people who's like it's just luck. Like no, people work really hard and like they make sure that luck isn't a factor for them.
That's a great perspective. Now that you are going to Brown, now you have a pretty good handle on what it takes to get into an Ivy League. What are the key traits and experiences do you think Ivy League schools look for in an applicant?
Yeah, it depends because again it depends on like what you're um like the activities you're doing. I think that I remember I went to Yale over the summer for one of their like summer programs, and they had a like lecture by one of the admissions officers, just kind of like answering questions, talking about Yale. And obviously somebody asked the question like, "Oh, what does Yale look for?" and a student. And I thought her answer was really enlightening because she said something that I think people like it would sting to kind of hear because it's kind of antithesis like what they think the college admissions process should be like. But I remember saying like, we're not looking for the best student or the quote unquote most deserving student. We're looking for a student who can keep up with the rigor here and will fit into our culture. And again, I think for a lot of people that like hurts to hear because they're like, well, if I'm the best, don't I deserve to go to Yale? And truly, I think like these schools, yes, they want the best and they want schools that are like students that are hardworking and like will contribute a lot, but they also just have like a culture to their school and they want students to fit into that culture. And you may not get into Yale not because you don't deserve to be there, but you just don't much match the culture that they're looking for, right? So it's hard to say like exactly what Ivy Leagues look for because they're all different and they all have different cultures and different like standards. But I think that if you work hard, you push yourself, you can demonstrate that you like can take leadership positions, are proactive about how you apply, and then are just cognizant of the fact that like the school has a culture. I need to present myself in a way that will convince them that I match that culture. You should be able to get in. That's it's overstatement, but like you should be able to get into a good place that you like. And I think that people don't put enough effort into that last bit because they just think that, like, oh, if I'm just the best at whatever I do, then of course I'll get into Harvard. And then they don't get in and they're like, why didn't I get into Harvard? It's rigged. But it's like they aren't, it's not a meritocracy. They're not always looking for the best people. They want people that are really smart and can keep up with their rigor, but that also just fit into the school. And not everybody does, and that's okay. But if you go into it thinking that just being the best will ensure you get in, then you're probably going to be disappointed, and that sucks. But just be as good as you can be proactive about your application, and do your research into applying to schools where you're going to fit.
That's a great perspective. I mean, we created Good Goblin to help college applicants, right? From college matches to putting together the application and then succeeding. What's your take on what Good Goblin is doing? to help college applicants?
Yeah, no, I think all of the help you can get is really, really helpful. Again, I think one of the worst things when it comes to like essays and just your application is it just being you? Because then you get to a certain point where like I've looked at this application 1,000 times, I can't look at it anymore. Like just my brain is numb to it. I don't see its flaws. I don't see like I just don't even like I can't even comprehend it anymore. So I think anytime you have like outside people that can help you with the process, it's really beneficial.
Uh, Thank you, Anotida. Thank you so much for taking the time. This was so good to learn from you, understand your journey, and we wish you the best as you head to Brown.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.